Lanier Poets carried a 2-5 record into tonight's game with Dothan, but Coach Charlie Sykes and his boys left with a 17-0 region win over the Tigers, virtually eliminating Philip Creel's bunch from postseason competition. After a scoreless first quarter, the Poets got on the board as Lanier's Kenny Washington intercepted a Dothan pass and ran it back for a touchdown. The extra point made it 7-0, and that's how the first half ended. Lanier's defense shut down the Dothan running attack, so the Tigers had to go to the air. Excellent defensive plays like this one, though, preserved the Poets' slim 7-point lead. Later in the third quarter, Lanier's Kenny Harris put 3 more on the board with a short field goal. The Poets led 10-0. Dothan, though, took the kickoff and marched 55 yards to the Lanier 5-yard line, but this third down pass fell incomplete. The Tigers elected to go for what seemed to be a cinch field goal, but the kick went wide of the right upright, and Lanier had survived the Dothan threat. A fourth quarter touchdown gave the Poets their 17-point victory margin. Dave Cody, WSFA TV Sports.
If Bobby can come through and give us a sophomore season as he had when he was the leading rebounder and leading scorer, we could be competitive in the league. And it's totally a question of his health. His weight's back, and we're just going to have to wait and see.
When will you determine if he's going to play this year or sit out?
We've given him that option, and we're going to go right up as late as we can, as late as the first ball game, to decide on redshirting. And we feel like that he's going to be able to do it because all parts of his game are coming around except the jumping, and the legs are just not there yet. If we can get that part worked out, we think he'll give us the kind of year we've been expecting out of him.
It's stayed steady.
And I think perhaps this is a small manipulation. Maybe people were getting a little bit resistant in the supermarket, and the markets have held the line a little bit.
Since Alabama Farm Bureau officials have warned these steady food prices are only temporary, the best bet is to stock up now before the holidays. The drought, which affected farmers' yields, will soon affect food prices and cause them to rise.
A lot of farmers are in serious trouble as a result of this drought. I think it's safe to say that we're in a position where all of the crops in Alabama have been affected by the drought.
Besides the drought, this summer's heat wave also took its toll, especially on pork and poultry. This means the supply of Thanksgiving turkey should be adequate, but it will cost more than it did last year. Jane Matheson, WSFA TV News.
McLemore began serving his 2-month sentence about 15 minutes before the noon deadline set by the judge. The former executive director of the Public Service Commission showed up with sheets, pillowcases, and other items to tide him over during his stay here. He had no comment on his guilty plea of accepting sexual favors from utilities regulated by the Public Service Commission. McLemore's sentence could have been as much as 10 years in a state penitentiary and a $10,000 fine. But courthouse observers say his guilty plea may have contributed to the lesser sentence. And so 40 days after he pleaded guilty to violating Alabama's ethics law, Ralph S. McLemore begins his jail term. James Mayberry, former South Central Bell executive convicted of providing McLemore with a prostitute, is still waiting sentencing.
Jail officials say McLemore will serve out his term in the county's newly created maximum security area of the county jail. What duties, if any, he will have not been announced. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News at the Montgomery County Jail.
In accepting the award, Denton praised the influence of Christian schools on our society. He called for a move to make Christian schools tax-exempt, as some other schools are, and Denton supported the influence of religion in politics by quoting portions of George Washington's farewell address.
Let us with caution indulge the supposition that morality can be maintained without religion.
Later, Denton commented on the recent poll conducted by Ray Evans, who predicts Jim Folsom Jr. will win the upcoming election. He says he hopes the Evans poll is wrong or that the poll will change, but says he's had his own poll taken.
My polls show, and I think the Ray Evans poll will reflect, that I began with the disadvantage in name identification and that I have reduced that and that I am now favored to win. That's what the poll I just paid for a good bit of money shows.
With the last days of campaigning in sight, Denton says he will continue his present campaign style with no major changes. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
Cutoff time for the last day of voter registration was at 4:30 this afternoon. People in line by then were allowed to register. And because of the anticipated backlog of mailing out registration cards, voters are notified at what precinct they will vote at so they can report there on Election Day. Absentee voting applicants must present a birth certificate, registered address, and the signature of the person who's going to vote the ballot.
I cannot hand the ballot to anyone other than the person who is going to vote it. A number of people in college, parents call. I cannot take an application over the phone. The applications do not have to come in on my application form. A note will do if I have enough information.
You must show proof you will be absent from the county or will be physically unable to get to the polls on Election Day. George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
Was very happy to accommodate you with cocaine or marijuana for other reasons, but I think we are at the most critical period in the history of the United States. It is a time which has been repeated over and over and again by civilizations that climb and then plateau and then go down the hill. And I think we're on the plateau, and if we as a nation do not gather our strength and our purpose and our determination and our will together, we're going to go down the hill the way England has just done in the last 50 years.
Neither Republican Jeremiah Denton nor Democrat Jim Folsom came to the rehearsal for the League of Women Voters-sponsored debate, but their representatives stood in their places and listened to ground rules. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to each question and then 1 minute for rebuttal. 3 news reporters will take turns asking the questions, moderated by Tracy Larkin. Following 6 questions, each man will have 3 minutes for closing statements. Denton won the coin toss and has elected to be the final speaker. Lack of space means that only those with invitations can come to the debate, but WSFA will televise it live Sunday from 4 to 5 o'clock. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
No substantive epidemiological or environmental evidence has been found which might suggest food poisoning or exposure to a toxic disease agent as the cause of the epidemic of illness among members of the Carver High School band on October 16th and 17th. In view of these findings, strong consideration should be directed towards the phenomenon of epidemic hysteria as the cause of a number of the observed illnesses.
They'll give us a severe test as far as our defense is concerned, and our defense has played well. We've improved since the first ball game and really played our best ball game a week ago against Arkansas State. But facing the wishbone for the second time this year presents us with a lot of problems, and it'll be a tremendous challenge to our defense to play this real fine Alabama offense, and they do play an awful lot of people.
If you like comparative scores, Bama beat Ole Miss 59-35, while Southern beat the same team 28-22. Alabama has now won 27 consecutive games, and Bear Bryant has never lost a homecoming game in Tuscaloosa. So the Eagles of Southern Miss have a tough time facing them Saturday.
lot of action has transpired close to the ground in the NFL this year. A number of methods for hitting the deck have been demonstrated, like falling down untouched. Many times, though, players fall down fearing for their lives. And why not? Defenders frequently make lunch out of ball carriers. Walking the sideline has become a health hazard for officials, coaches, and players alike. What's that old saying? My mother told me there would be days like this. Kickers and quarterbacks are a defensive lineman's dream. Linemen prey on the little guys who look like they belong in the junior high C team instead of in the NFL, making all the big bucks and getting all the ink. And falling over backwards has spelled trouble for many this year, on and off the field.
The Auburn defense, which held Georgia Tech to just one sustained drive all day last Saturday while picking off 4 interceptions, will be tested by Mississippi State's wing bone, or the Mac bone, as it is sometimes called in honor of Marty McDowell, the talented runner-receiver from Mobile. The Mac bone is designed to spread opposing secondaries out so that State's triple-option offense becomes more difficult to stop. Mississippi State has not had great success against Auburn the past 2 games. They've been able to put just 3 field goals on the scoreboard in the last 2 years. Offensively, Auburn must overcome its tendency to make drive-stopping mistakes, as it did against Georgia Tech. Doug Barfield is concerned about his team's ability to put points on the board, but more about his team's ability to stop the wing bone.
It's a wing T with a power set with a triple option built in. And I think that's the problem. They cause you to force your rotation in the secondary. You can't defend the split inside, which is a tough side against the wishbone, because they got a wing back sitting over there on the other side. So they force you to do some things in the secondary.
How did you guys been picking it up this week?
Well, we were slow at first. Began to look a little better by Wednesday. And hopefully we know what we're doing. We seem to know a little bit better now, and we'll have to know and be aggressive at the same time.
What's so special about these police cars? Well, if you look a little closer, you'll see a few that are different. For several months now, the city has been experimenting by using smaller cars.
We bought them because this is going to be the size of the car in the next 3 or 4 years. For that's one reason we bought them, and for another reason they are cheaper operated, and we're using some of them now in the administrative side of the police department, where we don't need a large car nor a powerful car.
Chief Swindle says the cars are currently being used for the supervisory personnel in the detective division. Only one of them is a black and white, and it's used by the school relations officer. He says the cars won't be used as patrol cars and cited several reasons why, saying it's hard to haul prisoners and difficult for the officers to comfortably ride in for 8 hours. But he says there are some advantages, like the large savings in fuel consumption. Since the manufacturers are moving more and more to the smaller cars, the chief says it's about time the city takes a look at what it'll be like in the future. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
You'll go out on election day and vote for this man. He shall. This is one of the most crucial elections that this country's ever had. We have the highest inflation that we've ever had in the history of this nation right now. We have the highest interest rates that this nation has ever had. We have the highest unemployment that we've had since the Great Depression of 1932. So what we need is a man for president who will bring down this high inflation, bring down these high interest rates, bring down this high unemployment, and that man is Ronald Reagan.
During that August event, the legislature decided to make everybody in education happy. So they not only appropriated all of the projected income that would be in the next fiscal year, which was approximately a 13 or 14% increase, they reached in and grabbed this big $70 million surplus and threw it in on the pile as well, giving education for that next fiscal year some 22 to 23% increase. And the surplus at that moment was gone unless the legislature comes to some kind of understanding about the cash flow problem. I predict we're never going to have a surplus because the legislature is quite anxious to appropriate all.
These tanning salons operate on a combination of ultraviolet light and the reflection from the specially lined walls. Although the radiation is like the sun's, the dose is more concentrated, allowing you to tan quicker. But for those who expect a golden tan in one visit, it's a disappointment.
The average person is going to tan in 10 to 12 visits. That's coming in about 3 times a week, starting off with a minute and a half or so, working up to a maximum of 10 minutes in the booth.
Short but frequent visits promote tanning, but attempt to lessen the chance of sunburn.
You could burn in here, but by our employees controlling the timers and the amount of time that the customers do get, it's very unlikely that you would, because we do start them off so slowly and work them up slowly.
How long would it take to burn?
Oh, someone as fair-complected as I am, if I were to go in now after not having been in the booth for quite a while, I could burn in probably 3 minutes or so.
Besides burning, exposure to the ultraviolet lights without goggles can cause further problems.
They definitely can burn your eyes if you look at them for more than a second or two. So we are required, and we do require that our customers use the goggles.
Besides indoor tanning in any weather, the UV radiation is used to treat psoriasis, although the dosage should be prescribed by a dermatologist. Jane Matheson, WSFA TV News.
Ron Yates has been shoeing horses for 7 years now. He's one of 8 qualified farriers in Alabama who makes his living hammering, measuring, filing, and nailing shoes on horses' feet. He says the horse feels no pain during the fitting process. He compares it to filing your fingernails. Ron says horses must have their feet properly cared for. He says the old shoes must be taken off so the excess hooves can be trimmed away. What got him interested in shoeing horses?
I had a hard time getting anybody to shoe my own horses, so I went to a school in Oklahoma, and to start with, just where I could do my own, I just got where I liked it, so I kept on doing it. It's pretty hard work. That's how come not many people are in it. It takes a lot of practice, and you have to do it every day to stay in good enough shape where you can handle the horses.
Ron says horses should be reshod about every 6 weeks, and at 80 cents a shoe, that's a pretty good deal. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
How are you going to set your clock tonight when you go to sleep?
An hour back.
How do you remember this every year?
I don't know. I just hear it on the news.
I just listen to the TV and the radio, and sometimes they say it.
I think you're supposed to run it back.
How do you remember this every year?
Reading it on in the paper and on TV. More or less hearing people talk about it, I guess.
My mom does me.
I set it back out up, don't I?
How do you remember hear this each year?
Well, I get it over the news sometime, mostly.
Set it back an hour.
How do you remember this every year?
Spring ahead and fall behind.
Where did you learn that little saying?
Television.
The three southern state officials held a brief news conference before continuing on the campaign trail to other cities in the South. Senator Nunn says it's a mistake to conclude that President Carter is manipulating the possible return of the hostages before the election to help him get reelected, though Nunn says everyone hopes the 52 Americans will be released, whether it's October 31st or November 5th. Commenting on the recent rise in consumer prices, Mississippi Governor Winter blamed the increase on the drought experienced throughout much of the country this past summer. Winter believes the president will carry his crucial home state.
We have a lot more visible support from the political leadership of the state than we had 4 years ago. I've been traveling around the state a good deal the last few weeks. I feel good about it. I feel that it's close, but I think we're going to carry it for Jimmy Carter.
Well, I don't take it for granted. I think the president's going to win Georgia. I think he's going to win in the South, but we're busy working there, too.
Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
Overexposure to the sun, whether by natural or artificial means, has long been cited by dermatologists as a major cause of skin cancer. And a UAB doctor of dermatology says Alabama has the highest rate in the U.S. of a skin cancer, malignant melanoma.
Maybe a habit of work, running around with the shirt off, the low latitude being in the southern part of the United States where the sun's rays are more acute and perpendicular most of the year. This has caused high incidence of this type of melanoma, so that there's perhaps a great calling for perhaps even the salons to advertise to their clients these signs of skin cancer.
Overexposure can cause other kinds of skin damage, such as easy bruising and lack of elasticity, causing wrinkles. And since the sun booth's rays are more concentrated, special precautions should be taken.
The more of it you're exposed to over a number of years, the closer you get to the problems. Therefore, if you're substituting these lights for natural sunlight, you must be aware of that and then cut back on the amount of natural sunlight.
One way to protect yourself from sun damage but still have a glowing tan is to start your tanning program slowly.
If you get a gradual tan, can you get a gradual tan without really overexposing yourself and then get to a point where you'll have a tan that protects you?
Dr. Walton stresses that wearing goggles in solar rooms is a must to avoid corneal burns and other eye damage. Jane Matheson, WSFA TV News.
This Delta Boeing 727 is replacing a smaller DC-9, providing 49 additional seats for the Montgomery area. Airline officials say there's a trend toward larger aircraft with an increasing demand for larger and more comfortable seats. This comes at a time when Delta is the only airline with flights to Atlanta. The only other airline providing the service was Ocean, but all that came to an end when the airline went bankrupt. Now there are two new airlines seriously looking at the Montgomery area, but officials with Atlantic Southeast and Pinehurst haven't made any final decisions yet. In the meantime, Delta officials are hoping to take advantage of Montgomery's additional flight needs by eventually replacing most of its Atlanta flights with 727s. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News. The format was similar to those of previous presidential debates. The candidates were given 2 minutes for each question and a minute for rebuttal. The first question was asked by Betty Cork of the Alabama Public Television Network, who asked what conditions would have to exist in the 1980s for either candidate to support military action. Folsom says he's very reluctant to send our troops to the Middle East unless we're assured there's a definite threat to our interests there. Denton says he will never be in favor of war again unless the U.S. can win and win quickly with a minimum of sacrifice. Then Folsom was given an opportunity for rebuttal.
No rebuttal.
Mr. Denton, you have 1 minute for rebuttal.
The two candidates also discussed issues in welfare reform, military draft, and the nation's economy, and they agreed with each other on most of these issues, except economy, when they were asked what sacrifices should be made to end inflation.
We can restrict deficit spending through other forms, and the thrust of that form has been to reduce it on the federal level by reducing federal expenditures and government expenditures. In other words, attacking the problem at the bureaucratic level where the excess spending occurs.
In terms of sacrifice, I would say stop cheating on welfare and conserve energy would be two principal things that we could do.
In his closing remarks, Folsom said he wants to push for the completion of the Tennessee Tombigbee waterway system and to have more roads repaired. Denton defended his credentials as an Alabamian and said his naval experience has prepared him for the U.S. Senate. It's too early to tell who actually won the debate, but in less than 2 weeks, the voters will decide. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
Thank you, Mr. Folsom. Thank you, Admiral Denton, once again.
Well, when I first thought about playing college football, I knew it was a decision I'd have to make as far as that I really want to play football because academics has always been a big part of my life, and I didn't feel really even long ago that I wanted to play pro football. I felt like I wanted to get out in the business world and see what it was like, and I knew that if I played football that it would take away from school, but I felt, I'm a Christian, I felt that's what the Lord wanted me to do, and so the mixture of school and football is taken away from my school, but I feel the benefits I'm gained from football as far as leadership and experience and the old saying about not being knocked down and getting back up and charging full steam ahead. I believe that football will benefit me as much as the few extra grade points I could have gotten if I'd concentrated on school.
Athletics has always been the recreation part of my life, but I've always had that academic side too, and I think it was stressed from my parents' point of view, and they started it out real early, and I think I kind of just grew into it.
Is it difficult during football season to keep your books up?
It's very difficult because when you get tired, the main thing most people want to do is lay around and rest, and it really takes a lot of discipline to get yourself up and go to class, and when you get there in class, do something, try to learn something, and I think that's really a hard part of it.
With a coach like Coach Barfield, it makes it a lot easier. He's always willing to work things out about laboratories, and I've had several labs, and we've never had much of a problem with it. He's always been willing to give and take, and the professors all throughout the school also willing to work things out with you and help you any way they can.
Mostly I try to keep from letting the football get me, too interrupted during the studies and all, and I go home after practice every day and try to study before I come back and eat meals at night. Then after I go home from meals, I study again. So it's really like they work hand in hand.
It's a matter of discipline, doing
yes,
it,
yes.
making yourself do it every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Do you expect to get help, to be treated differently by your instructors than the other students who don't play football?
No, sir, I don't. The only time I expect a little help is, if I have a game and I have to leave on Friday, I'll go by and see the teacher and I'll explain the situation to them. And usually they're cooperative and they'll let me know what I'm going to miss and they'll help me out in that respect. But other than that, that's the only help I expect.
Then, if in fact you are pro-industry and pro-business and pro-jobs,
people in Westinghouse and GE and so on keep hoping that it will, but as you know, we finally managed to get up to
fatality accident. The uranium which will be processed there, and I found that the average concentration of the fissions on Earth that react with everything. I asked the Westinghouse people how they're going to contain the fluorine in fabrication plants.
Westinghouse owns all kinds of media that they can get their point of view across to you. And it's not just Westinghouse, the other energy companies are doing the same thing. So
It wasn't what most people would call a heated debate. The candidates agreed on major issues. Both say the nation's foreign stance should be improved and that the volunteer army isn't working. Republican Jeremiah Denton called for universal military training for men and a draft if necessary. Democrat Jim Folsom Jr. favors registration for the draft. The candidates also spent a lot of time talking about welfare, both saying reduction of welfare abuse would improve the program, along with an increase in work incentives. Folsom blamed the bad economy partly on government spending, while Denton spoke of welfare abuse and energy conservation. Neither man used his rebuttal time to attack his opponent, but used the extra minute to expand his own earlier statements. It was only in closing remarks that the candidates referred directly to issues raised during the campaign. Folsom returned to his theme of being in touch with the people, something the Folsom name has long been known for.
As I have traveled across the state of Alabama and talked with the people in every town and county in this state, I have received one cry of alarm from them. They're concerned about their nation, they're concerned about their state, and they're concerned about the prestige of this country.
It has been insinuated that since I've been away from Alabama serving my country, that I'm not an Alabamian, that I don't want to listen to Alabamians. I maintain there are more Dentons buried in Alabama than those of any other candidate running for any office in this state.
Whether there was a winner in the cool debate will be decided by the voters. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
More appropriate definition of one of my politician friends who once remarked that editorial writers a great deal at the very minimum, there is a possibility that a candidate, and it could be either President Carter or Reagan, might be defeated in the popular vote and yet be elected president. And the upshot would be elected president under the Electoral College, and the upshot would be that you would have a crippled president for 4 years. After all, this very thing has happened at least 3 times in our history, starting as early as...
Ambassador Earl says failure by the U.S. to ratify SALT II means an endless arms race risk and a threat to national security and nuclear war. In Montgomery to address the Air War College at Maxwell and later during a news conference, Earl, the director of the U.S. Arms Control and Disarmament Agency, says SALT II isn't the final word on arms control, but it's one step in a series of strategic arms limitation measures. Earl says the treaty, which took 6.5 years to draft, will be ratified by the U.S. when the Senate realizes the benefits of the treaty to this nation.
What has happened is after the original outrage, if you will, when the votes were simply not there to have a treaty with another nation that behaves in the fashion that they behaved in Afghanistan, is I think that there is now simply a realization on the part of a number of senators of the point that I was just trying to make, that SALT is in our benefit regardless of what may be happening in Afghanistan or the Persian Gulf or elsewhere.
Earl says the treaty initially limits the U.S. and the Soviets to 2,400 ICBM launchers, SLBM launchers, and heavy bombers, and it will eventually reduce this ceiling to 2,250. George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
Thank you, Mayor, for
that I, son of Dr. Martin Luther King, we must first go and vote.
Thank you so very much, Mayor Ford,
Mr. Vernon Jordan, and others who have come. If we elect Mr. Carter, we're going to have to continue to exert pressure so that we can get a national health insurance bill, so that we can get the implementation of the Humphrey-Hawkins full employment bill. I said that I think that it would be much easier with Mr. Carter so that we can get a holiday bill for my father, which I think is needed. But I think that if we had a Reagan, negative forces would come would come up, and we would create a hostile atmosphere and violence, people fighting each other constantly to achieve an end which would never be achieved. Ultimately, we would be... And the judge would not hear the case. But now there are 2 district judges here, federal.
Alabama joins the ranks of very few states who've adopted a statewide testing program for teachers. The educators at today's meeting represent 20 curriculum committees responsible for establishing the criteria for the testing programs. Assistant State Superintendent Dr. C.C. Baker says the educators are looking at topic and objective outline reviews in the development of the teacher examinations.
What we're talking about is a statewide test leading for certification. We don't have such at this time. Of course, there are some examinations that are required by the respective institutions. And of course, if the institutions see fit to continue to give those examinations, they have that privilege. But I must add that irrespective teachers who are going into teaching in the state of Alabama must take this certification test.
Exams will be given to all prospective teachers, including those who've changed fields of study, who've entered collegiate studies since June 1st, 1977, and to all instructional support personnel who are being certified in those areas since September 1st, 1979. The test will be written, administered, and scored by the National Evaluation Systems in May, August, and December of next year. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
Thank you, Bob. On my far left, Attorney Julian McPhillips, who is a Carter-pledged Democrat to the delegate, rather, to the Democratic Convention, and then Mayor Emery Farmer, who is the county campaign manager for the Reagan-Bush campaign. Mayor, let me start with you. What's your initial reaction to the debate?
Well, I think it sharply contrasted the 2 candidates. I think that it showed Governor Reagan believing in peace through strength, that it is necessary that if we ought to have peace around the globe, that we must be militarily strong. I think he discounted completely the Carter attack, that he is a warmonger. I think that he dealt with that issue very well. I would liken it unto the fact that nobody ever mugs Mean Joe Green. They always pick on someone who is weak. And if America is strong, then no one will pick on America. I think he sharply contrasted the economic positions of the 2 in that Governor Reagan is for free enterprise, for a strong private sector dealing with the problems of this country. I think that President Carter continued his approach that more government is better, bigger government is better, all of which to me means more government and more socialism. I think that the differences in how to deal with the basic problems of the country, again, were in sharp contrast about how to deal with the problems of the cities, the schools, these things. Every time Governor Reagan came to the private sector and said that the people of this country know better how to solve their problems than government bureaucrats. President Carter again came back to all the programs that he started, all the big programs, the big bureaucracies of the government, that they can solve problems better than the people.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. McPhillips, what about your reaction?
Well, I was just tremendously proud tonight of President Carter. It shows how much he's grown in the 4 years in office that he's been there. He was truly presidential. I think it just shone through tonight, and just it glowed on him. In every answer that he gave, the specifics that he gave in his answers, as opposed to the overly broad, simplistic answers, the speculation that Governor Reagan was using. I think he was able to show how erroneous some of the facts and statistics that Governor Reagan has cited by pointing to California and showing that the taxes in California had actually quadrupled. You know, Governor Reagan holds himself out as a great tax cutter, but he showed that you just can't really do that. He pointed to the Reagan Kemp-Roth proposal and said even Business Week, which is a very conservative news magazine, says it's just it just won't work. It's going to bankrupt the country. I mean, it's going to cost $130 billion being slashed at one time. It's just totally unrealistic. Here we have a man who has lived next to all the tough decisions. He's made thousands of decisions, and there's just no training for being president like the presidency itself. On the other hand, we have a man in Ronald Reagan who's been running for 12 years, but consider what he's been doing the last 6 years. He's really done nothing but lived the soft life on a ranch. He's been, of course, glad-handing and making speeches and all that, but making speeches and glad-handing is no qualification for being President of the United States. President Carter is obviously a president of all the people, not just for the wealthy and the privileged, but a president who's concerned about the needs of the unemployed, the needs of those that are hardest hit by inflation. He's posed some tough solutions. It's a worldwide problem, inflation, but he's been there right on the firing line making the tough decisions. As he said, the experts probably differ 50-50 on a lot of these choices, and ultimately the president himself has to make that decision. And the biggest decision the president's going to have to make, and he pointed out to it, in the nuclear age, is who's going to have his finger next to that button. And when I and other American voters go to sleep at night knowing that President Carter's finger is next to that button, I think they're going to be far more secure in their dreams than thinking Ronald Reagan might be close to it.
Thank you, sir. Final comment from you, Mayor.
Well, I would certainly agree with my friend Julian that President Carter has been president for the last nearly 4 years now. We got 8 million unemployed, and depending on which index you look at, 12%, 14% of inflation. President Carter blames everybody in the world for inflation but himself. It all comes right back to the leadership, and that's where it is. And I think the differences between the two were sharply contrasted. Peace through strength under Reagan, less government on our backs under Reagan, peace through negotiations and retreat under Carter, and more government.
Thank you, sir. And a final comment from you, Mr. McPhillips.
Well, I would just say that Carter has created almost 9 million new jobs during the time he's been in office in the past 3.5 years, and that's more than double the 3.5 million new jobs that were created under the Nixon-Ford administration in the preceding 4 years. Further, he's cut the national deficit from what was $67 billion deficit in 1976, the year before he took office, to what was a $26 billion deficit last year in 1979, almost a $40 billion slash. And further, as Carter himself pointed out, that he is working for peace, and not only would Reagan undermine his work for peace, but undermine the work of 2 previous Republican presidents who had worked for peace as well. And so by keeping Carter in office, we're keeping a unity.
Soon, though. He's a brand new baby. He's a big baby boy born tonight to Chris and Donna Grimshaw. He made his appearance at 7:51 tonight and tipped the scales at 8 pounds, 14.5 ounces. We're happy to report that baby Grimshaw and his mom are both doing great. Congratulations to Chris and Donna. We'll be back tomorrow night at 6. The Tonight Show is next from NBC.
Mrs. Allen, her attorney, and District Attorney Jimmy Evans stood before Judge Hooper this afternoon Following remarks from each of them, Judge Hooper told the former state treasurer that although she's led an impeccable life other than her conviction, she violated the trust of the people of Alabama and was removed from office. The judge says because of the suffering she's undergone, I cannot find it in my heart to place you in the penitentiary. Then he sentenced Mrs. Allen to serve 6 months in the Montgomery County Jail with the remainder of her 3-year sentence on probation. Outside the courtroom, Mrs. Allen talked briefly with reporters.
Yes, I respect our system, I respect the judge, and I will serve with honor the 6 months. I don't have to worry about anything because I've never compromised. And I just feel great because I know that before it's all over, that it's going to be used for good. We may not understand it, but it really will. And down the road, I can't tell you exactly how much, but down the road, everybody's going to know the truth. That's the way it works.
Judge Hooper's order comes one day before Mrs. Allen was to report to the state penitentiary because of her ethics law conviction. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
District Attorney Jimmy Evans told the jury of 10 women and 2 men, and I'm quoting now, that Juanita McDaniel intentionally tried to conceal a wrongful payment by the state to her. Defense attorney Bill Baxley told the court he didn't dispute the fact that McDaniel filed the expense vouchers, but he said it was a simple bookkeeping error. One witness, Don Grove of the Artmore Telephone Company, told the court he paid Ms. McDaniel's hotel bill and mailed a receipt to the then PSC president. McDaniel attorney Baxley said, and I'm quoting now, "When all of this is over, you're going to wonder why a mountain is being made out of a molehill." Prosecutor Evans, and I'm quoting again, "Intent to deceive is at the heart of the problem." Baxley asked 2 witnesses if errors were discovered on other employees' expense vouchers. They said it was not unusual. Both also told Baxley they knew of no other state employee who had ever been indicted for making such a mistake. The prosecution, led by Evans, charges that McDaniel knew the hotel bill had been paid and that McDaniel cheated the taxpayers by filing a false expense voucher. The trial is expected to continue for several days. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News at the Montgomery County Courthouse.
Are there any nominations for directors to come from the floor? Opposed? All right. They're closed. At all in favor? I know in a year like we've had, it would be hard to say that the economy has grown, but I feel so confident in the economy of this area and the attraction it has for industry and quality industry that I think this is our main selling point. As you know, right down the road we have general... This meeting is to receive the report of the nominating committee for directors and report on the activities of the various counties.
Very good.
Please nomination John N. Albrecht Jr., A. Owen Ballard, Wynton Plum III.
Phil, I'm concerned about our players and the effect that a lot of things have on them. We want to win, and they want to win, and we're going to try to work to win this week. And we just simply stated that we're not going to get into a lot of comments and ifs, ands, and buts and this about outside matters that we can't do anything about anyhow. And I ask people to cooperate with our players and talk about Florida, our team, what we hadn't done and what we have done and these type things, but let's don't get into the coach's situation and all that. The coach is fine. I mean, they know where to find me, and we're gonna fight and battle and try to win. We need to win and against Florida, against a good football team, and I think that's the subject that we ought to be talking about rather than other things.
Well, I think it shows how close we are to being good, and just a few mistakes away, a few breaks, and we would have won both of those games. And it's been a lack of concentration on our part, I believe, and I think we're going to get things back together and come on strong this weekend.
Well, it's been really hard on us because we come back and we say what went wrong, and we don't blame it on any one person in particular. No, any plays. I know one for sure that one play certainly does not make a game, and we just but it's just something that, you know, as young men and as football players that you just have to overcome.
We are disappointed in our record, you know, thus far, because we figured in this phase of the game we'd be, you know, a lot better than we are. But we're not hanging our heads or anything. We know we have a good team, so we're just going to go into these last couple of games and, you know, really give our effort.
Era of this state and country to real. My bill makes prayer in public schools voluntary. Voluntary. At the commencement of the first class each day in all public schools, the teacher in charge of that class shall announce that a prayer may be offered by a volunteer student, and those students who do not wish to participate may be excused. Either we want our children to have this opportunity or we don't. Either we want our children to have the same opportunity that we had.
Everybody associates Birmingham, I think, with the way the national election turned out. We are dealing with emotional problems, and to get in an adversary proceeding where the husband and wife really are steamed up and get mad at each other, you're not doing the child any good. I think the focus, and we can do it very easily by referring these to a master or through some type of reference and utilizing social workers or other disciplines and finding out what is the best interest of the child. And you do it in a more informal atmosphere, and I think that even though a man and a woman may have extreme differences with the proper type of person conducting a hearing with no rules of evidence, that you can.
The request for an opinion on the use of state aircraft was prompted when the governor's wife reportedly used a state plane to go to religious functions. The commission contends it would be legislating if it stipulates how such aircraft should be used. Commission member Adolph Wheels says previous governors used state planes for personal trips, but he didn't approve of the practice. Commissioner John Vickers says the use of the aircraft is compensation that comes with the office of governor. The commission, while saying the governor is not in violation of the law, suggested the executive department set some guidelines regarding the use of state aircraft. A final vote on a request for an advisory opinion whether state legislators who are educators can vote on teacher pay raises is expected after the commission studies the issues more fully. Jane Hines, a member of the American Association of University Women, who raised the voting issue, says she directed her request at all special interest groups. Paul Hubbard, executive secretary for AEA, says it must be determined if there is a direct financial gain, as stated in the code, for the commission to consider issuing an advisory opinion. George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
Police say with the arrest of Ronald Eugene Andrews and Charles Collins of Montgomery, they've broken up a number of recent burglary operations in the downtown business area. Police say the tip that prompted the investigation came from Officer Danny Smith, who matched fingerprints of known suspects using a new system of filing and comparing fingerprints. The stolen goods were worth up to $100,000. Most of the merchandise was office equipment. Less than 20% has been recovered. Sergeant Robert Hankins says the investigation has been going on for months.
This investigation has been ongoing for the past 3.5 months. This apparently is going to be a burglary ring which was operating in our central business district, and there's been at least 10 detectives assigned to the case over that period of time.
Police are still investigating, and more arrests are expected soon. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
At a morning news conference, Dahlberg told reporters Folsom has a better feel for the working people of Alabama and says his experience in youth will help put the state on the road to building strength in the U.S. Senate.
Jim Folsom Jr. wants to put more federal money into our Alabama road program, and our 5,200 school bus drivers appreciate this idea. Folsom also wants to fund the child nutrition program that feeds nearly 3/4 of the children in the state of Alabama, while the Republican candidate wants to cut back that program. We want to make it clear, too, at this time that this endorsement does not carry any money with it. The support personnel of the state don't have any money, but it does we're giving him all that we have. That's our votes, our support, and our prayers.
The AACSE is a spinoff from the Alabama Education Association. The organization was formed 3 months ago when Dolbear broke away from the AEA because of a conflict of interest between himself and AEA Executive Director Paul Hubbard. The AACSE represents 21,000 public school support workers statewide. Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
Governor James' only comment on the presidential debate was that it was interesting. He said he listened to the issues and thought the country benefited when politicians debate. But unlike former Governor George Wallace, who, following last night's face-off, endorsed President Carter, Governor James still hedges about his own preference.
People of Alabama are very independent, and any Alabama citizen has a prerogative to endorse whoever they feel like they should endorse.
Will you ever make a last-minute endorsement?
Oh, I think you have to wait to the last minute before anything like that could be talked about. But time alone will tell.
Governor James says his principles will determine his degree of enthusiasm for either candidate. He told the Cattlemen's Association these beliefs include untangling the country from the influence of high-ranking officials. Besides not backing the Democratic or the Republican candidates, James told the NCA that as a conservative Democrat, the National Democrats remain alien to him. Jane Matheson, WSFA TV News.
There were more people speaking against nuclear energy than for it. Of some 30 who testified, only 6 or 7 advocate present use of nuclear energy. Some of the concerns expressed are the effects of low-level radiation on workers and citizens, waste disposal and transportation of that waste, the possibility of a major accident at a nuclear power plant, the chance of sabotage of plants by terrorists, and whether power plants, particularly Browns Ferry, are tornado-proof. Proponents of nuclear energy say those points are based on emotion rather than fact. They say the waste problem has been solved and that proper regulation makes nuclear power plants safe. In addition, advocates say power plants are necessary for the economic growth of Alabama, including the jobs plants provide. And they say nuclear energy is a less expensive way to produce electricity than oil. The interim committee made no decisions based on the testimony, but will report findings to the legislature. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
There was very little testimony this morning before the prosecution and defense concluded its case. State Comptroller George Dean was the only witness called to the stand today, and his testimony focused primarily on state vouchers and checks. Defense attorney Bill Baxley told the jury in his final argument that Juanita McDaniel made a minor error and had no intention of defrauding the state. Prosecutor Jimmy Evans, in his final appearance before the jury, charged the former PSC president knowingly and feloniously defrauded the state of Alabama out of $80.25 for the travel expenses she hadn't paid. The jury received the case for deliberation after about 4 hours of testimony and final arguments. Through it all today, McDaniel showed no emotion. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News at the Montgomery County Courthouse.
There are a lot of people who serve in time in the penitentiaries for small amounts of money, and that's, I think, what guides this office, and that we cannot look to the amount of money all the time, particularly in a case involving a public official, when we know that they're convicts in the penitentiary. All they want is a parole, and they want justice meted out to other people who break the law on an equal basis with them. And so it bothered us about the amount, but we felt like we had to go with it.
That was just because of my white racist views.
Do you have white racist views?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Well, how do you feel about blacks?
I'm against race mixing and communism.
I'll get up on Go ahead.
Stallion class is number 405 Ebony's correct. Entry of Mr. and Mrs. Vernon McGee of Atmore, Alabama, and Billy Gray is riding 405, wins the class.
Like your horse tonight, Billy?
Yes, sir. I thought he was a great horse.
How do you do at the celebration?
I didn't have this horse at the celebration. I got him after the celebration. He was second there with another trainer.
I see. You're going to bring him back, I'm sure, in the stake.